Hi everyone, and welcome to the CBP Education Team's Ask an Expert webinar. Is professional networking just for extroverts? We have 700 people registered today. My name is Karen Gonzalez, and I'm the Associate Marketing Manager here at CBP. I'll be moderating today's webinar, and we'll be introducing our featured speaker, Judy Gruder, in just a bit. But first, I'd like to do a quick walkthrough of the webinar format for those of you who may be joining us for the first time. Today's webinar will run for approximately 90 minutes. During the presentation, if you have questions, please submit them to me using the questions function in the webinar controls. Judy will be pausing throughout the webinar today to answer your questions, and I'll give everyone a chance to send those in during the break. One representative from CBP's education team is also in attendance, Jack Powers, and he'll be available to answer questions as well. As with all of our webinars, today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sending out a link to the recording in approximately 2 weeks. Please note the PowerPoint presentation slides are not available for this series. Now I'd like to introduce our expert. I'm very happy to welcome CBP's Ask an Expert, Judy Gruder. G is principal and trainer. Judy has been a career development program consultant and trainer for more than 35 years, as well as a National Certified Counselor and NCDA Master Career Counselor. She's a recognized authority on the uses of assessments in career counseling and is co-author of a number of publications and reports on the Strong Interest Inventory, such as the new iStart Strong report and Myers-Briggs tools. Now, don't forget to join us for a live tweeting at twitter.com/CPPeducation using hashtag CPPAAE. We'll be reading your tweets and retweeting them. Now, please join me in welcoming Judy, and now I'd like to turn over the webinar to her. Welcome, Judy.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Karen. I'm going to start today with a story. In fact, I'm going to use several stories during this program because I think I've learned the most about how different types go through the job exploration and job search process and networking process from their stories. So I thought I'd share a few, and I'm going to start with my own personal story. It's actually the experience that first brought extroversion, introversion type differences to my attention, and it was a long time ago. I was a career counselor on the Cal State Los Angeles campus. It was before Dick Bowles' What Color is Your Parachute was published. It was still in manuscript format, and 20 of us from Cal State and UC campuses were invited to gather for a week during the summer at UCLA to try out the whole parachute experience. We now know it as What Color is Your Parachute, but at the time it wasn't published yet, no one knew about it. We had the general feeling that it was going to be huge. I guess we were right. Dick Bowles had it right then as he does now, that self-exploration comes first, then career research, then making contacts. Part of the parachute experience was a day of information interviewing. We had to make personal contact with at least 3 people in various career fields and interview them to learn about their career paths. Keep in mind that none of us lived where we were doing all of this, so we were in a new geographic area. We were researching all kinds of career fields. The concept of cold calling people to broaden awareness of jobs exploded after Parachute was actually published, along with what were called job clubs. Job clubs were really interesting. They brought people together to support each other on a phone bank, and the facilitator rehearsed candidates on what to say and how to say it, and they spent the day, or in fact the week or the month, cold calling every employer in the phone book. This wasn't really information interviewing. This was job search. In fact, it was sales. This was the early 1970s, and the job market was every bit as tough then as it is now. Now, both the equipment and job and career exploration techniques have gotten a little more sophisticated these days. Information interviewing now falls under the huge umbrella of networking, and we're no longer scripted in how to do it. I didn't know type when I spent that week at UCLA, but I did know that I was a little bit uncomfortable with all of this, this networking stuff that we were doing. I really felt different. I loved the quiet times when we were doing the individual career exploration exercises that Parachute is known for. I didn't love the social events every evening and the one full day and part of another doing information interviewing. I did everything that was required, and I picked up some good skills. But the feeling of being different stuck with me for a long time until I learned about type 4 years later. And I now know that my roommate and team partner for the week was an ENFJ type. I'm an INTJ. We've been friends and close colleagues for over 40 years and often talk about how different our experiences were that week, a week that shaped how each of us has gone about our own career development. One major takeaway was that we needed to find diverse ways of exploring careers and employment opportunities. I was working with engineering students at the time, a time when the engineering job market was very competitive for new graduates. And even then, I had had enough experience role-playing interviews to know that what we were learning about cold calling wasn't going to work with engineers. But the most important takeaway was the importance of knowing yourself in the job search process. As practitioners, we're already pretty much aware of job search strategies, but I'm afraid that young college graduates are even less aware of the basics now than they were then. This is an age of I want it now, and very often the it hasn't been defined. It has to start there. The focus seems to be on what employers want rather than on what the individual job searcher wants. The realization is missing that what employers want more than anything else is an awareness of who you are and how who you are can impact their industry. This was really brought home to me a few weekends ago, and I'm going to insert another story here. I was participating in a one-day workshop at our local college on preparing for summer jobs and internships in the community. I was doing the morning segment on knowing yourself and type, of course, and a panel of employers talked about potential opportunities in the afternoon. After my morning, I was eating lunch by myself on the patio, recharging my introverted batteries, and a young woman came over and almost timidly asked if she could ask me a question. I remembered her type from the morning to be ISFP. I'll call her Toby for the sake of the story, because I'm going to come back to her later as well. She shared that she was looking for a summer job in sales, a pretty broad target if you have an introverted preference and are going to start networking. I asked the usual questions: what kind of experience have you had? What classes are you taking? What kind of sales? She didn't have a lot to say, but I managed to pry out of her that she really liked sports. She was thinking about transferring to a university business program and would love to get into some area of sports management. But she said it as if it were a dream, not a possibility, not a possible reality. She didn't believe it herself, and I could tell. I made some fairly generic suggestions, and we both went back to the workshop. During the afternoon break, her mother came over to me. Parents seem to be very much a part of the college experience these days. Her mother was very animated, clearly preferred extroversion, and started to tell me everything that she wanted her daughter to do this summer. Somewhere it fell out that Toby was, as her mother put it, addicted to baseball. Not the playing of it, but the study of it. An uncle had pitched professionally for 10 years during her early childhood, and she'd been obsessed with everything he did. Long story short, she knew everything about baseball statistics, especially pitching records. Her mother didn't seem to think that this was very important, but somewhere in the back of my mind I was hearing the old career counselor's mantra: if you don't get paid for what you love doing, you'll do it anyway, so you might as well get paid for it. A little later, I found Toby and mentioned that her mother had told me about her fascination with baseball. I almost saw a personality transformation right in front of me. She started telling me about her uncle and about the teams he had played for. I could feel her passion as she told me how she knew pitching and batting records and could predict what pitch a catcher was going to call even before the call was actually made. What I was seeing is what happens to introverted types when they're talking about what they have stored in their heads, what they know about. This felt much more employable than a vague notion of wanting a summer job in sales. And it apparently was. I don't know all of the steps, but she's now working part-time for our Pacific Coast League baseball team. She's doing a blog that highlights the personalities of the players and how they relate to the local community, ISFP all over the place. Apparently, someone in her class knew someone who worked for the team. Once Toby was able to clearly state what she wanted, the door opened. This isn't just a message for introverted types, it's a message for all types. The job search has to begin with knowing yourself and what you want. enough storytelling for a minute. I told that story because key to bringing introverted energy to the surface and connecting with other people is being in an environment and with other people where they can talk about content that they're secure about, that they're comfortable with. And type is a valuable tool in every stage of the job search. The stages go something like this. First, you have to know yourself. As Toby's story points out, in today's economy, more than ever, a successful job search requires knowing and being able to clearly state who you are and what you want. The MBTI starts here with the identification of the heart of type. Using types, we identify career fields and job opportunities that reflect who we are. And next, we thoroughly research industries and occupations using the strengths of our type and watching out for our pitfalls. And we write a resume that authentically represents who we are in the language of targeted audiences. And that's key. There is no set format for a resume. It changes from industry to industry. The font size changes from industry to industry. The readers change from industry to industry. So our own type and authentically representing ourselves is important, or we won't get to people that we can connect with. Then we prepare for an interview with decision makers. And finally, and hopefully, we negotiate conditions for acceptance, prioritizing in line with our values. In type language, prioritizing in line with the heart of our type. It boils down to knowing yourself. Who am I? What do I want? And how can I use my strengths to find it? And knowing the decision makers and being able to adjust how we present what we know about ourselves. I'll start with just a very brief overview of type. I know there are some who have joined us who don't know type already, and I want to make sure that we're all at least talking the same language, and this will just take a minute for all the experienced users. Type is all about 4 pairs of polar opposites that represent natural preferences for the way people naturally prefer to direct and get energy by using extraversion or introversion, how we prefer to take in information by using sensing or intuition, how we evaluate that information and make decisions by using thinking or feeling, and how we prefer to live our daily lives by using judging or perceiving. Each preference or type identifies normal and valuable human behaviors. There are no right or wrong MBTI results. They describe how people can be different and still be normal, and also describe people of the various types have a lot in common with each other. There's a key theoretical point here, and it especially applies to the job search. The first half of life is about identifying and developing our natural preferences for perceiving and judging, what we call the heart of our type. Jung referred to this period of life as specialization. These are the preferences that frame college majors and career choices. These, along with the EI and JP orientations, also frame job search behaviors for young adult students and clients. Just to give you a heads up, I'm going to pause for a minute after the next slide. If anybody has formed questions up to this point, I'm going to pause in a couple of places, and I'll give you at least a 1-slide heads up. But if you have questions about the theory or what I've said about extroversion and introversion so far, after the next slide would be the place. Now, Jungian theory suggests that the second half of life is when we more naturally access our opposite functions. We integrate them, along with their EI and JP orientations. And I'm talking about this because asking someone to access their less preferred functions and orientations before they've owned and developed what is most natural is a particularly frustrating challenge. And this is where teaching networking and job search to young college graduates and high school students is really, really difficult. And when we ask them to do things that are different from who they naturally are, it tends to muddy the who am I waters if we ask them to act like someone else before they know who they are themselves. What seems to work better is first owning the heart of your own type and then choosing to access less preferred functions. Teaching those skills once they can say this is who I am is much easier than just kind of teaching a script. Now, I prefer intuition and thinking, but I know that to get the training job with the hospital nursing staff, I have to talk sensing and feeling. I have to communicate SF from the very first step in the networking process. I can do this because I'm choosing to access certain parts of my personality in order to fulfill the needs of my NT heart of type, but I know that NT heart. I'm sure that part of this is due to age and experience and wisdom, and I'm clearly in the second half of life, perhaps even the third half, but I've taught the same concepts to college students, and it really works. When someone of any age knows who they are and consciously chooses to act outside of their type, it's very different from being taught to act a certain way because that is how it's supposed to be done. It's the difference between saying, I'm okay, and I want the other person to see my strengths, and saying, I'm not okay, there's a right way to do this, and I have to learn it. And I've used that information to kind of set up where we're going to go with some specific skill building. Karen, I'm going to pause here just in case anything has come in up to this point.
Great.
I also needed a little bit of water. Is there anything on that end?
Okay, so we actually got, I see one that came actually through Twitter. So Mary asked, who was the person who proposed self-knowledge, then research, then contact?
Well, my gosh, it originated, believe it or not, with Frank Parsons back in, this is the general career exploration framework, that there's certain steps involved in actually choosing a career and finding a job. And my gosh, Frank Parsons was the beginning person in career exploration and job search back in the 1920s. Then I think probably from that point, John Holland, he's the Riasek theory person. That's the theory behind the strong and several other instruments. That certainly started with it. It's knowing yourself and then matching yourself to work environments. And Dick Bowles with Parachute in 1972, which is when that came out, was the first one to really, really emphasize it. And he has scripted it out. His Parachute model is the model that most career counselors use in some form or another. Most of us don't use the full-blown parachute thing because it takes hours and hours and hours. But we start with assessment, usually, and helping people to know what their natural strengths are. And then we match that with career fields and then teach them how to approach those career fields in their own type. I hope that answers it. And if anyone else has any information, I know that we've got a lot of experienced people here. If I should be crediting someone that I'm not, let me know, please.
Thanks. Okay, now we got a few of them that just came in. So we got one from Jennifer. Jennifer asked, what are college majors based on again?
The heart of type. And we're going to be talking about the heart of type in just a few minutes, so you'll be able to see the links. But most of the MBTI type and career publications link the 4 hearts of type, the middle letter, well, you're seeing them on the screen here, the 4 hearts of type with career fields. So it's the heart of type that gives us the career field, and then you add E, I, and JP to actually narrow it down to specific positions, specific jobs.
Great. Here's another from Lillian, and this is a good clarification question. She asks, can you be both T and F?
Both T and F. And that's a really good question. We all have both T and F or S and N. I mean, whatever of the middle 2 letters you're talking about. What our type tells us is where we go first. So just to use my own type, I clearly prefer thinking. When I'm making a decision, my mind automatically goes to thinking first, and then it brings in how my decision is going to impact others. It accesses feeling. So I like to think of type not as excluding the letters that are not in your type, but just kind of giving you the order that you go to in using using cognitive functions. So there's actually a model that says we look at specific information first. We get the facts, that's sensing, and then we envision possibilities, that's intuition, and then we look at it logically and evaluate the information that we have, and then we consider the impact on others. So in any decision, in any behavior really, we're bringing in all four functions. We just spend a different amount of time in each one depending on what our natural strengths are. Sounds like a whole webinar we could do on that, Karen.
Yeah, I think so. Here's another from Jill. Is a statistic that 25% of the population is introverted and 75% extroverted, or has this changed?
It's unless there's new data that I'm not aware of, our most recent data has it almost a 50-50 split. Sometimes when we look at it, when we look at the population in general, it moves slightly in the introverted direction. I know that the general representative sample that CPP uses is slightly in the introverted direction, something like 51 to 49, something like that. I've seen other samples that have been slightly in the extroverted direction. It's definitely not a 75-25 split. There isn't any data to support that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And somebody will probably jump in and tell me if I'm wrong. And please, I'm a T. I can handle it. If I'm wrong, just tell me.
Great. Here's another from Nicole. Do you have a breakdown of what skills, i.e. types, are needed for each industry?
Yeah, we've done several workshops on that, and one of them's archived. I think probably the best one we did, and Karen, you might know better than I, we did one earlier this year on using type in academic advising. And we were focusing in that webinar on the specifics, the specific industries. And by industry, that's all jobs. That's not just business stuff. That's everything. We were looking specifically at what industries attracted which types. And I'll give you just a quick example here since you're looking at the four hearts, and then we can talk about it more when we look more at the four hearts of type. For instance, business attracts ST. Social work and personal services attracts SF. Engineering and product design and development, things like that, attracts NT. And the arts and the ministry and counseling and things like that attract NF. But I'm almost afraid to say that because they don't exclude each other. The trick is to find an environment that values your heart of type. So I'm an NT that's operated in an NF world for 40 years, but I had to find the niche, thank you CPP, that appreciated my NT more than a therapy environment, for instance, where I was doing so much NF. And that's just a quick overview of that whole heart of type thing.
Great. So we have just a couple more, but actually I got one here from, let's see here, Joe. And Joe tells us, he says, would probably help those not familiar with type to clarify that when we discuss IE, we're not talking about social comfort, shy versus outgoing, which is what most people assume with those terms. IE in type is about source and focus of energy. And he also says...
And Karen, I'm going to interrupt you because we're doing a whole segment on that in just a minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he got ahead. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
He also says, Judy did a great job spelling this out early. It might just need to be clarified with those unfamiliar with this type. So yeah, so definitely, Judy.
No, I agree, and I make a point of hitting on that. That's our favorite little elephant butt slide. So we'll talk about that.
So
I almost took that out. So thank you, Joe. I'm glad I put it back in.
Me too. Okay, do you have time for a couple more, or should we?
Sure. No, we're okay.
Okay, so here is one from, let's see here, from Claudia. What are your thoughts about older job seekers who do know themselves, but even at a later stage in life are not comfortable in job search strategies that are not typical for their type?
Interestingly, if you, I can't even put an age spot on it, but people who are pretty comfortable with who they are can usually learn the other side of their type. I mean, if they're thinking types and they need to access feeling strategies, for instance, in order to do some networking, if you give them the rules, if you give them the specifics, okay, T-type, these are feeling behaviors that we can practice. That usually works. It's just a question of role-playing and practicing, and we're actually going to talk about that as we look at each heart of type. And Karen, that's probably enough. So let's hold the rest of the questions because we'll break again in about 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Judy.
Okay. And we're actually going to come back to the heart of type in a few minutes. But first, before we do that, I wanted to talk specifically about the extroversion-introversion preference pair. And Joe, thank you for inserting that because we're going to talk extensively about it. You probably picked up on the source of the discomfort I was describing during that week that I was first learning about information interviewing. And I was very young then, I have to tell you. I was right out of college. And you may have also picked it up in the story that I shared about Toby. And it was most likely related to the fundamental difference between extroversion and introversion, which is our preferred source and direction of energy. Of course we all function in both worlds, and I'm glad someone asked us if we can, for instance, if we can be both T and F. Well, we can be both E and I. In fact, it's built into the formula of type theory that we function in both worlds. We have to. But extroverted types recharge when they're active and interacting with others. Their energy depletes when they're by themselves for too long. It's the opposite for introverted types. They recharge when they're reflective and by themselves. Their energy depletes when they're with others for too long. And we're the most comfortable, the most natural when we're in our favorite world. And for introverted types, that most likely isn't networking and expanding contacts face-to-face. So let's go about talking about how extroverted and introverted types might go about expanding their contacts most comfortably, and then we'll look at the heart of type lenses that come into play during the job search itself. As I've been suggesting, when preparing students and clients for the job search, we want to start by encouraging what they do well, even if it doesn't fit the networking rules that we're used to teaching. Every type benefits from confidence in who they are naturally. Then we can work on their potential challenges. Extroversion is about energy, and its potential strengths and challenges have to do with how much of it is expressed. It can lead to extended interviews, the ability to engage others in conversation, and showing lots of confidence and enthusiasm. Natural extroverts are very good at this, and they're natural networkers. But there can also be too much extroversion, something that we can teach students and clients to adjust to the tone of the interviewer when it's necessary. When extroverts extrovert too much, we need to teach them to slow down, to count to 10 when feeling particularly energized to speak. We need to teach them to practice letting the other person speak first, listen, and then reframe what the person has said. And show how their people skills can help the bottom line of whatever industry they're interested in. Key is matching the tone and energy level of the interviewer, or the contact if we're just making initial contacts. Now, introversion is about energy too, but it's turned inward instead of outward. This works very well in low-key conversations, but has to be stepped up a little with extroverted interviewers. The primary strengths of introversion are in gathering information from written resources and the care with which they speak. But we want to make sure that these clients don't overlook the importance of networking and the job interview itself. Decisions are usually made as a result of face-to-face contact, not from reading what's on paper. So the resume may get them to the interview, but it's not going to get them the job. There are ways to overcome the challenges of introversion. They can develop other ways to network. In these days of emailing, messaging, social networks, media, there are many ways in addition to face-to-face. Introverts are also more comfortable in networking groups when they have a specific role to play. And I'm going to come back to this later. When they have something that they're responsible for. For instance, greeting and signing people in at a professional association meeting kind of gives them something to do to meet other people. It's also more comfortable for introverts to start where it's safe, with close friends and gradually expanding from there. They can actually practice establishing personal connections with people, reaching out to people they don't know in non-intimidating situations. And preparing answers to interview questions ahead of time can sometimes help, and becoming thoroughly familiar with industry content. This is critical always, but more critical with introverts, because they're so much more likely to connect with others around something that they know about. And in response to everyone's favorite interview question, what are your weaknesses, turning introversion into a strength and showing how their concentration can help the bottom line of the industry that they're approaching can become a real plus. And here's where I want to talk about shyness, because there's a difference between a preference for introversion and the trait of shyness. Shyness is something that comes in amounts, and introversion isn't. It's a natural energy source. Many introverted types are shy, but so are many extroverts. On the MBTI Step 2, this often shows up on the initiating versus receiving facet. And what often makes introverted types appear shy is their reluctance to say what they're thinking until what they are thinking has fully taken shape. They're the most comfortable talking when the conversation taps into the heart of their type. We have to keep reminding ourselves that the extroversion-introversion dichotomy is about energy. It's not about talking or not talking. You can see and hear extroverted energy. It's active, it's fast-paced. Extroverted types connect with each other almost immediately. Remember, we call them the natural networkers. You'll often hear them jumping into each other's sentences as they develop ideas and share information out loud. If they're new to a group, they're likely to pick up on a thread of conversation right away, whether they're familiar with it or not, and they talk fast. I'm trying to imitate extroversion a little bit. Introverted energy is internal. It can also be active and fast-paced, but the activity is underneath the surface. It's like brainstorming with yourself. We don't see it, we don't hear it. My favorite analogy is of a duck, calmly moving across the water and paddling like heck underneath. And I'm going to pause again after the next slide if anybody's getting ready with some questions. Now, extroverted networking encompasses everyone they know, and their energy tends to connect with everyone. Introverted networking happens one contact at a time. Their contacts might not even overlap. It's the difference between casting a big net and then sifting down, and targeting specifics and then expanding. Introverted connections are going to be around content more than around experiences. That's a huge difference. Extroverts, when extroverts are talking to each other, the last time they experience something just comes right out on the table. And one person says, I did this last night, and the next person says, I did that, and they're off and running. With introverts, it's around that content that they've been developing internally, and more on a one-on-one basis. They're going to make a connection. And when they make that connection, it brings their energy to the surface. And that's what networking is about. We have to get that energy out there somehow, but they have to know the energy that they're projecting first. And I'm going to ask you to keep these energy differences in mind, because we're going to actually combine extroversion and introversion with the hearts of type. But I want to pause again just in case questions have come in before we get to some actual techniques for the job search itself.
Okay, so I was just going to continue with a few of the ones that we got in before, and we have a few new ones too. So from the first pause that we had, Wendy had sent a question saying, you mentioned knowing part of type, but needing to access other parts to get a job. For example, the nursing training job. Do you think if we're having to access the other part of type from the beginning that it might not be a good fit?
I'm not sure whether Wendy means from the beginning of life or the beginning of career and academic exploration or the beginning of the job search. The theory says that if you are in a career field that attracts others of your type, it's going to be the most comfortable and natural for you. And certainly in a job search, if you're the point of all of this that I'm talking about today is I remember Patrick Kerwin saying this years ago, and I've never forgotten the phrase. What we're doing is we're looking for our people. We're trying to find people that we connect with. And extroverts have that extroverted flair very often, unless they're shy, where they can connect with a variety of people, with a variety of situations. And introverted types are much more targeted. So in their case, it tends to be even more critical that they identify their target, and they do that by knowing themselves first. The clients that I've worked with over the years tend to be, however, people who have, from very early in life, they've been pursuing careers that are not consistent with who they are. And that's difficult, and sometimes it's at midlife that all that stuff comes to the surface and we have to sort it out. So I hope I've addressed Wendy's question. I'm just not sure of when she wanted me to start with that answer.
Great, thank you. And Wendy, if you want to send in a comment to clarify, please feel free. So here's another from Joan. Let's see here. I'm in a corporate environment and do not feel fulfilled. I am ENFJ and feel that church ministry is my calling. Does this make sense, as NF is my heart of type? I'm in my early 40s and feel like I'm stuck. This move could be what I need, but I'm hesitant starting over.
Wow. Well, first of all, Joan, ENFJ is a type that can find a niche anywhere in any work environment where they can feel that they're with others of their own type. I hesitate to use the word fulfilled, because if you feel that the ministry is something that's going to be fulfilling, you're not going to find that in a corporate environment. But I do see a lot of ENFJs in human resources, training and development, employee assistance work, certainly customer service. I mean, there are many areas where ENFJ strengths can be utilized, but fulfillment comes from making sure that your values are met. And NF is about empowering others. And if you feel that the corporate environment isn't doing that, then you have to think about where you could find an environment that would. I'm also aware, though, that people in their 40s don't usually make a huge shift. I mean, it's hard. It's really not too common, especially in this environment, to leave the corporate environment and go to seminary. I mean, that's really big. And it takes certain risk-taking awareness and information in order to do that. However, sometimes when people realize where their fulfillment, and I use your word, is going to come from, they'll stay where they are in their employment and just make sure that the rest of their life meets that fulfillment need, whatever it is. It's tweaking life, as we're calling it. We used to call it finding life balance. Now we call it tweaking, life tweaking.
Thank you.
That would be a 90-second counseling session, do you think?
Yeah. Okay, we have one from, let's see, from Marty. Is extroversion related to face-to-face contact, or can it be fulfilled through phone contact?
I think individuals have to answer that. I really don't. As an introvert, I can't speak to it personally. I know. Okay, personal story. I was married to an ENFP who passed away several years ago, but I was with him for 35 years. And I noticed when he was home alone, he always had the television on, and I can remember him arguing with Larry King. And I used to say, Bill, what are you doing? I mean, and he'd say, I just need extroverted contact. And so I think the phone might be one way to make an extroverted contact, and maybe somebody else will chime in with their opinion about that.
Great, thank you. You know, I'm getting, and Judy, I don't know if this is possible, but I'm getting several questions from people if we can look at the extroversion and introversion strength and weakness slides, if possible, while you're answering questions. I got a few people asking about that. Let's see
okay,
here.
I'm just, hold on, let me, I'm not sure, go ahead with the next question while I'm looking for which slide would be best at doing that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so from Dr. Kathleen, what about social anxiety on top of introversion?
And just to address going back to the slide, there were 2 slides that address the E versus I stuff. I think if I do that, this is probably going to be the last question we're going to take right now anyway. I'd rather come back to that at the end if I could.
Okay, no, that's great.
Okay, social anxiety is a disorder, an emotional or a psychological disorder, and the MBTI doesn't address that, and it's not my field. My suspicion is that introverted types who are not comfortable in their introversion would be more likely to experience social anxiety than extroverted types. And I'd like to think of that overlay. I'd like Dr. Kathleen to think about that overlay as we look at how introverts can be most comfortable networking, because I think the same thing applies. Of course, in a clinical setting, it's more serious in how it's approached. But again, it's being comfortable in your introversion. The way that introverts become comfortable in their introversion is through the heart of type. So that would be something to think about as we look at the hearts of type. And Karen, we better go on and then pick up questions again in a few minutes.
Great. Thank you, Judy.
Is that okay?
Yes, and thanks, everyone.
For those of you who aren't familiar with this yet, the 4 hearts of type make up the columns of the type table, and they are the critical piece in initial career choice and choice of college major. They pretty much define who we are, as well as the industries and employment settings to which we're attracted. And we talk about them a lot in these webinars, counseling to the hearts of type, teaching to the hearts of type, interviewing with the hearts of type. But I want you to think of them today as the content of networking. And I'm emphasizing content, as I've already said, I think about 4 times, because it's the secret to bringing introverted energy to the surface. Whether it's in a social situation or a networking situation or an interviewing situation, and whether it's in face-to-face networking or in written and electronic communication. And we'll look at ST first. ST content is practical and factual. Their career fields are about practical ways of using facts and details. And I've actually listed a few career fields here in the middle column for those of you who are wondering which career fields fit with which hearts of type. And on a resume and in face-to-face contact, they're best at communicating facts, efficiency, and practical solutions. And their natural style is to be brief and to the point. They present information sequentially. They're businesslike. They use conventional words. They speak and write in bullet points. And they energize around talking about budgets, stating specifics about organizations that they know about, making logical comparisons, describing step-by-step events and processes, sharing their knowledge of facts. And when they find others who talk about the same things, connections happen naturally. Now, NT content is conceptual, it's logical. Their career fields are about theoretical systems that are intellectually stimulating. On a resume and in face-to-face contact, they're best at communicating ideas, strategies, logical problem solving. And their natural style is narrative, intellectual, framing ideas in theoretical models and using logical analogies in unique words and phrases. And they energize around challenging others' knowledge and logical reasoning. They energize around verbal banter and what-if questions and sarcastic wit. And when they find others who like the same things, connections happen. Now, key with introverts is to move beyond their innermost circle of contacts, to find others who share their content, and to feel confident while they're doing it. The IT, introversion plus thinking combination, is about logical problem solving and practical solutions, albeit from different S and N perspectives. For introverted thinking types, talking with new people is easiest when there's a task behind it or when they share a common purpose for being in the same place. For instance, taking on specific roles at conferences, checking people in, handling evaluations, etc. Introverted thinking types are most comfortable making casual conversation around something they're responsible for doing. Think of teachers. Think of actors. The content is there. I presented at a national conference last year where a graduate student was assigned to take care of program handouts and evaluations, and we talked for a few minutes ahead of time, and it was clear to me that she preferred introversion and thinking. We immediately connected around the topic that I was presenting, so there was one new contact for each of us. And then as she collected evaluations at the end of the workshop, she had a connection point with everyone who left the room. And at lunch I saw her at a table with 2 other people who had been in the workshop, and they had an easy starting point for conversation. And that's what introverted types need. Taking a university class or attending a skill building workshop that doesn't attract your immediate circle of contacts can also work. You aren't with the same people that you know well, but everyone there shares the same purpose for being there. I remember I used to do career counseling in private practice, and I was doing it at a time when teachers, many teachers in California wanted to leave education and move into human resources and training and development, more into the corporate setting. I think that's still happening a lot even now. And we used to talk about how they could try out their career change before actually doing it by attending an extension class in human resources at one of the local universities. More than one made career shifts through that initial step in a new direction, through contacts they made sitting in that class. Attending community service organization meetings, things like Rotary, Kiwanis, etc., is another alternative. Prepare ahead of time so that you know what the focus of the meeting or event is. New people at meetings like this aren't expected to initiate. They can ease in by just listening and responding until they find another person who shares their ST or NT interests. Joining a professional association where everyone shares a common purpose is another way to expand contacts. Participating in online communities is very big now, but extroverted and introverted types are likely to be attracted to different kinds of groups. Introverted thinking types might make contacts through a LinkedIn professional group, for instance, that focuses on sharing technical information. I've seen hobby-related chat groups evolve into networking contacts. One of my fellow online Scrabble players relocated in the banking field through a contact that she met in the Scrabble chat group. I talked about the introversion thinking combinations first because they tend to struggle the most with being social and will often have the smallest inner circles. We'll look at the SF and NF hearts of type next, not entirely different as they share the introversion core preference. But first and foremost, we want to help every type to recognize and capitalize on their strengths during the networking and job search process. Reaffirm that networking isn't about being judged. It's about finding our people, others who share our core type. These tips certainly apply to extroverted types as well, but introverted types tend to benefit more from knowing what to expect. Help ST and NT types to emphasize their preparation, research, and logical problem solving. Coach them to talk about how their strengths can contribute to industry goals. Reinforce their ability to listen and respond to what they hear in conversation. Script out and role-play conversation entry points and hypothetical questions. Help them to connect on a personal level by listening for evidence of others' interests. Practice summarizing accomplishments. Most ST and NT types do this very well on paper, but can go off track when they only have a minute or two to say them out loud. And role-play answers to questions. Help ST types to hold back on too much detail and NT types to be more specific. Help them, IST and INT especially, help them to lighten up, but be careful with humor. Humor can be a turn-off to non-thinking types, and sometimes thinking types aren't aware of that turn-off. Now let's look at the introverted feeling types. ISF types are sympathetic and friendly and are most comfortable connecting around content that is practical and helpful. Their career fields are about practical ways of helping others. On a resume and in face-to-face contacts, they're best at communicating how what they have done has been helpful to others. Their natural style is descriptive, sequential, personal, and it uses conventional words and language, nothing fancy. They like to talk about and they energize around personal stories, how their work affects their family, the personal impact of resources and decisions, volunteer experiences, the history of relationships, how long they've been a part of this organization or that group. And when they find others who like the same things, connections happen naturally. NF types and INF types are insightful and creative and are most comfortable connecting around content that is unique and original. Their career fields are about using creativity to empower others. On a resume and in face-to-face contacts, they're best at communicating ideas that will personally impact people and causes that they care about. Their natural style is narrative, expressive, personal, and it uses unique words and creative combinations of phrases. They like to talk about and they energize around theirs and others' ideals and visions, using words that paint images and feelings. Relational trains of thought. One thing reminds them of another based on personal meaning. They relate new information to their own personal perspective. And when they find others who like the same things, again, the energy just comes out. There's common content there. And there's confidence when they know this about themselves. These types find it challenging to move beyond their close circle of friends. These are the types these are the people that they're the most comfortable with, but most people don't find jobs through their closest friends. They need to be encouraged to move beyond their close circle. They're often less independent and need more support than introverted thinking types in the networking process, and feeling a sense of safety is critical to their success. The IF combination is about helping others, albeit from different S and N perspectives. For introverted feeling types, talking with new people is easiest when they have someone with them whom they already know well, and when they share the purpose of helping others. I call it team networking. You're supporting each other as you reach out. Start with small groups around something that you're interested in, a hobby or something artistic. Doing something with others is connecting through common content. It gives the introverts something to do that they have in common with the other people there to talk about. Volunteer with a community service organization that meets a need for others or that contributes to your vision of a better world. Attend a self-improvement workshop of personal interest, finding your passion or personal goal setting or dressing for success, for instance, something like that. Join a professional association and look for opportunities to be helpful behind the scenes, reviewing conference proposals or arranging carpools for monthly meetings, for instance. Most IF types already participate in online communities. Relationship-based contacts can often be turned into career opportunities. Now, especially with introverted feeling types, reaffirm that networking isn't about being judged, it's about making new relationships. Help SF and NF types to capitalize on their collaborative and creative strengths. Coach them to talk about how their collaborative nature contributes to team outcomes. Reinforce their ability to listen and respond to the personal aspects of what others say. Script out and role-play objective responses to hypothetical questions. Practice summarizing accomplishments in terms of potential employer benefits. Introverted feeling types tend to downplay what they do best. Keep them focused on a firm personal needs statement and not to deviate to make others happy. And this is something that that happens a lot with feeling types, that they have a goal and they know what they're looking for, and then someone else asks them for help, and they move away from their focus. And that can often take some support to get them back on their own personal needs statement. And help them to direct energy forward when they experience rejection and not to take it personally. Karen, I'm going to take questions in just a minute before we go on to the next slide. What I've tried to do here is first talk about extroversion and introversion, and then talk about how when introversion is paired with content that, that introverts are comfortable with, it brings the energy out. It broadens the energy splash, so to speak, and they can broaden their circle beyond the people that they're used to being with. It's very different than it is for extroverted types, who can vary unless they're shy. Of course, if there's that trait going on, it's different. But extroverted types can walk into a new social situation or a new professional association arena or a conference, and they're networking from the minute they walk in the door until they get tired. Every type gets energy from both introversion and extroversion. It's where we get the most energy, where we have to go to recharge. And introverts have to come into those situations already charged. And that's something I didn't say, but if you're exhausted to begin with, and then you're going to a networking luncheon or something, an introvert, it doesn't have the energy to bring their content to the surface, even when they meet someone else who shares the same language. And Karen,
Yes.
I'm going to wrap up with some general information about resources and type and things, but let's address some questions first because we've got some time to do it.
Okay, great. Okay, so we got a lot of really great questions. So this next one, I kind of want to combine it because we got a lot of questions regarding shy extroverts. So the first one is from Demona. She asked, what does a shy extrovert look like? That is, what behaviors do they exhibit that would identify them? And the other question is from Rusan saying, any thoughts about how to assist shy extroverts?
Boy, that's a really good question. Shyness, I don't have a dictionary definition in front of me. Maybe someone can come up with it while I'm thinking this over. Shyness is not being able to, or not feeling comfortable, almost pulling back when you're with other people. It's even with even knowing who you are. I think a lot of it is related to not knowing and owning your strengths as an introverted type. But I think of it as on the initiating receiving facet of the step 2, receiving is waiting for others to approach you. Being in a group and waiting for someone else to make the introduction. And initiating is coming into a group and being the person who introduces people to other people. And I think of shyness as that super receiving. It's that holding back and waiting for someone to approach you. And then if you're super shy, someone else approaches you and you don't know how to respond. You're not comfortable responding because you're not comfortable with yourself. With a shy extrovert, I seem to think that the strategies could be the same in both situations. Role-playing, rehearsing them, giving them specific rules to follow. Try doing this. The next time you're in a group, try this one thing. Go up to one person that you don't know and try saying this. And I think, and perhaps shy extroverts would have an easier time doing that than shy introverts. In the step 2 materials for the MBTI, in the facilitator's guide and understanding your own step 2 results, it talks a lot about strategies for developing the other facets and that those resources might be helpful for those of you who are using the step 2. And I don't want to say that the receiving piece of the initiating receiving facet is all about shyness. It's about other things. I've just so often seen that facet come up when people say they're shy. That's really that's really all I can think of to add right now, Karen.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I'm wondering if I was trying to locate a slide that might summarize the extroversion and introversion challenges and overcoming them, and I don't have one that put them together. I have this one. Let's see if I can do it. This one that talks about overcoming introversion challenges. Maybe I'll leave that one up for a few minutes while we talk about this.
Thanks. Oh, and how nice. We got Catherine and Joan. They looked at the definition for shy. And
oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so let me read. One of them is timid, readily frightened, or startled. The other is being reserved or having or showing nervousness or timidity in the company of other people. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I was talking about it more in type language, and I think that many introverted types can experience that, but that's not what the introversion preference is about. The introverted preference is about energy, and for introverts, energy comes from internal sources, and the major source of introverted energy is content and sharing content with another person. That's what brings introverted energy outward. And if I purposely did not include type dynamics in this webinar because it's too complicated. But in a quick statement, all types theoretically introvert a part of their personality and extrovert another part of their personality. So those middle two letters in the heart of type, one of those letters comes out more comfortably, more easily, and the other one is kept more private. It's more internal. And introverts are that way, and so are extroverts. So, for instance, an ENFP type, let's take a type that tends to be associated with extroversion very often because they have so much energy and enthusiasm. ENFP types are very comfortable sharing their enthusiasm about ideas, but what they're not comfortable doing is sharing their feelings, that expressing feeling judgment. I don't like what you've done, or this is how I feel about this. It's because for ENFP types, the feeling preference is an internal thing. And so I think we could probably do a whole webinar on how type dynamics can be used to overcome some introversion challenges. End of type dynamics lecture. Do you have another question, Karen?
Thank you. Let's see. Let's see here, William. I've read that some people are in between I and E. I believe someone referred to this group as ambiverts. Is this a valid group distinction?
Not in type theory. Not in type theory. Remember that, excuse me just a minute. I'm sorry, I muted for just a minute to clear my throat. The purpose of the type instrument is to accurately separate people into categories that describe their natural preferences. And if you are in the middle on E and I, and nobody is in the middle, but if you may be on the assessment itself, but see, EI determines what's dominant for a person, which of those middle two letters is dominant. And if I would rather think of it as everybody extroverts one of those middle two letters and introverts the other. And then, of course, there are the two letters that are not represented in our type. So an NF has got all that ST stuff going on, and part of that is extroverted, and part of that is introverted. So we all use the cognitive functions, those are the middle two letters, in both worlds. It's not about being in the middle of extroversion, introversion. And, you know, I've verified in my 45 years of using type, I have verified almost 10,000 types. And I've never, ever seen anyone who, once they understood type fully, said EI was equal. It's which of those middle two letters you go to first defines whether you're extroverted or introverted, or whether you have an extroverted preference or an introverted preference. And again, reinforcing we're all both, but it's not about the EI dichotomy. It's about the middle two letters. And I know that there are some publications that talk about being in the middle. They're not type. It's not type. It's another interpretation. It's not the Jungian interpretation. I was pretty TJ about that, wasn't I, Karen?
No, that was great.
I'm going to get spanked. I'm going to get spanked when we're finished. Be gentle.
Let's see. Okay, this is one that was sent in earlier by Elizabeth. Elizabeth asked, what is an example of content that introverts network over?
It varies from heart of type to heart of type. Introverted ST types will network around financial content of something, budgets, that kind of thing. INFs will very often network around creative interests, just as an example.
Great. Thank you. And I just want to make a quick comment. We're getting a lot of questions on whether we can repeat certain things or go back to certain slides. Unfortunately, we don't really have time to go through all those, but we are recording this webinar. While the slides will not be available, we will be recording the entire webinar. So we'll be posting that and sending out a link to everybody. So just FYI, if you're taking notes, I totally understand that you may not be able to catch everything, but you'll definitely be able to hear this again. So quick side note. But another question that we got was from Michelle. Michelle asked, how do type dynamics influence networking? Although I have a preference for E, I would rather get run over by a garbage truck than go to a networking function. That's great.
Yeah, that's great. I hope she doesn't get run over by a garbage truck.
No.
It depends on what the last letter of her type is. This was Michelle, you said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Will you ask Michelle to tell you what the last letter of her type, ask her if she's willing to share all 4 letters, and then I'll respond to the question.
Okay. Okay, she's an ENFP. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, then ENFP is naturally extrovert dominant intuition. So being in a group where you can discuss ideas. I've been in brainstorming groups in counseling departments, for instance, where they're brainstorming programs that will benefit their students. And at conferences, they do the same thing. They get with other people who are doing the same kind of work, and they start brainstorming programs and products that will benefit their students. It's sharing ideas that will impact and empower people positively. And so it sounds like we've got an ENFP that it isn't finding the place at a networking function to actually do ENFP networking. But I agree. As an INTJ, I should just love going to lunch with engineers. I'd rather get run over by a garbage truck. Thank you. So it's not specifically type defined.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Let's see. Here is another. Let's see. Marty. Where do we see the type manifest in passions? For example, if I think I should be an artist, but I'm in a business career, how can I figure out what to do?
That sounds like that's a career counseling question. If you're, and it's kind of, it takes me back to the person who asked about being fulfilled in the ministry, who was in a corporate world. Especially INF types. I'll talk about this slide too in a minute. I just thought it'd be a good one to have up while we're talking. INF types, especially INFP types, have to do art. They have to. And if they're not, then they don't have the energy to do whatever their job is. And there are a lot of INF and INFP types who don't do art specifically because their work takes so much energy. And the trick is to find a day job that doesn't drain so much energy that they don't have energy left over for nights and weekends to do their art. The flip side of that for INF types, and I use that type because it's the type who usually finds themselves in a business world who needs to do art, they can often find career positions, jobs, where they can be treated as if it were art. And that's why so many artists are therapists. the INFP who works one-on-one empowering others. And when I listen to them talk about how they empower others and compare it with how I empower others, they're doing art. And it's actually the art form is the client that they're with in the moment. So it's finding space in your life where you can feel that and do that, and making sure that the energy is there to do it.
Great.
You know, Karen, I just had a great idea.
Yeah?
Let's do a career counseling radio show about type. And we just do 90-second career responses to type questions. That would be so cool.
That would be cool. We could do like a Google Hangout or a Twitter tweeting.
A Google Hangout. Yeah, my generation would say radio show. You're right, a Google Hangout. We got it. Okay.
That's the new big thing I'm learning. So
okay.
I'm getting all my social media stuff.
Good.
That is a great idea, though. Let's see. Here's one from Carol, and this is a great question. So Carol says, Judy mentioned differences of EI in online communities and mentioned how I might utilize those, but not the and mentioned how introverts might utilize those, but not the extroverts in online communities. What or how do E's utilize the online communities?
And I think the point I was trying to make excuse me, is the difference between thinking and feeling and how they approach online communities. And I don't think the differences in E and I. Both certainly can use online communities. I think introverted types might be more comfortable with online communities than they are walking into a networking function, for instance, as Michelle said. And feeling types, whether extroverted or introverted types, may find themselves connecting better around online communities that are more social and outside of work interest related, personal. They're more personal. And thinking types tend to gravitate more towards online communities that are technically oriented. Now, I love the LinkedIn group on the Strong because we're talking about specific questions related to the Strong and the technical aspects and how to interpret it and how to implement it, and it's all that T stuff, and I love it. And yet I'm very uncomfortable with Facebook unless I'm there for a reason. And that's the combination of the I plus the T, I think. That's the best I can do with that, I think.
Great, thank you.
Let's just do a couple of more, and then we need to wrap up with a couple of slides just to tell people how they can get discounts and things.
Great. Okay, let's see here. Here is another. Sorry, we got a lot of really great questions, so I'm trying to pick up the last few. Okay, here's one from Paula. Would you say that SF and NF types have high levels of emotional intelligence?
I wouldn't be the one to comment on that. It depends on how you identify emotional intelligence. I'm sorry, it's not my area of expertise, and so I just don't want to get in hot water here.
Okay, I got another one from, thank you. I got another from Nicole. I am an off-the-chart ENFP and work with many Is. I want to help them express themselves more and be more comfortable. Are there tools I can use to help them promote their skills?
Yeah, I want to give just one, I hate to say piece of advice, but there's one tip for ENFPs working for introversion, and that is if you're in an empowering relationship. So you're in a relationship where you're helping them. First of all, it's about them. So what you want to do is ask open-ended questions and then listen and encourage their response. ENFPs are so enthusiastic and so excitable that it can be overpowering to introverted types, especially if they're expected to respond to that enthusiasm very quickly. And if you ask the open-ended question and wait for the response and then encourage what they say and help them to reframe it if they need reframing. So I heard you say this, try saying it that way. And that's the reframing and role-playing. My experience in supervising ENFP counselors is that they're just so excited. They just want to empower with their ENFP-ness. And excuse that language, with their ENFP, and it's more about calming it all down and bringing to the surface more quietly what the person's strengths are? That's a great question. Just the fact that was it Paula that asked the question? Just the fact that she's aware of it, and I mean, she's almost 100% there.
Great. How many more questions do you have time for?
Okay, 4 minutes.
Okay. So let me ask this one here from Kara. So I work in an office where there are, let's see here. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm totally reading the same one. Let's see. Okay, here's one from Trish. Trish is asking me, any recommendations for further reading and or information on this fascinating subject?
I would recommend Introduction to Type and Communication, I think. That's just as a starting point, because networking is about communication, what our strengths are and what our preferences are. And that's one of the Introduction to Type series that CPP publishes.
Great, thank you. You know what, I'm sorry. I was starting to read Kara's, and for a second I thought I had already read it, so let me start over. So Kara says, I work in an office where there are 5 of us on a team that work together. I am the only NF on the team, the rest are ST. Any suggestions on how to connect with them or feel like my ideas are being valued? I feel like they all take over in meetings and connect so well when it comes to new ideas, and I struggle to connect with their thinking.
Oh, I can really empathize. First of all, I would hope that you both appreciate the differences. If you've got 4 STs, do they appreciate what NF brings to the table? You probably appreciate what they bring to the table. You're having trouble connecting with them. Hopefully they see that it goes both ways. What I try to coach NFs to do is to talk about how their NF gifts can impact the bottom line. So you're talking in ST language. It's when I do this, the outcome is going to be that, which is going to result in X, Y, and Z. So it's literally expressing NF gifts in ST language.
Great, thanks, Judy. Do you want to just go on because
Yep, we've got a couple minutes. Go ahead.
Let's see here. Okay, we got, actually this is a really nice comment. We got a comment from Susan. She says, thank you, Judy, for making such a beautiful statement around INFPs and how counseling in people are their art form. That was very nice.
And I feel that so strongly because I've been using the MBTI with the strong for 40 years. And INFP is the only full 4-letter type that correlates with one theme on the strong, and it's artistic. And that's just such a statement. I mean, of course, my NT looks at that data, and when I meet an INFP that isn't involved in art in some way, and that isn't just the visual arts, art comes in many forms. If they're not involved in art some way, I go after that. I want to know why, because when they come out of the womb singing or painting or taking photographs or acting. I mean, that's what NFP is about. Let's do one more, and then we better wrap.
Okay. Let's see. The last one is from Jennifer. How would you see Asperger's figuring into the IE or Shyness type?
And again, that's beyond my area of expertise too, but there's some really good articles in the CAPT archives, capt.org. They've done some writing both in the Bulletin and the Journal of Psychological Type on type and Asperger's. I just can't, I don't want to say something that'll get me in hot water. And let's wrap. Karen, is that okay with just some final slides?
Yes, that's fine.
As usual, CPP is offering a 10% discount off of your purchase of products. This is not on international orders, but any orders in the U.S. And make sure there's a code here, expert413, expert413, and just make sure that you purchase your products before May 10th. And CPP also is involved with a lot of conversations online. There are 2 LinkedIn groups. One is for the education team, which the education team is what's the team that's coordinating these webinars. They also we also have a LinkedIn group up for the strong, Facebook, Twitter, blog, and Pinterest as well. And thank you, Karen, for the hard work you do on all of those online networking sites. It's just amazing.
Thanks. I love it.
I know you do. It fits your type. A couple of things that are coming up. The next webinar is Finding Your Best Fit Type. In that webinar, we're going to look at verifying type with types that are unclear. And it's for instance, how to verify that EI thing. So we're going to look at type through several different lenses. A lot of type dynamics, and we'll also look at temperament theory and a couple of other things. Really exciting. You're the very first ones to hear this because I got the word 30 minutes before this webinar started. The new revised, updated, strong, and MBTI combined career report is being released this weekend on Skills 1. You can learn more at CPP in the sample reports section. It includes all of the new occupations from the revised occupational samples on the strong. I'm not too excited about that or anything. We have worked on this for a long time. It's huge. Most of you know, if you're interested in CEUs, that you're eligible for 1.5 NBCC and MBTI Master Practitioner CEUs. Make sure and request your certificate before May 10th. And here's the link, cpp.com/AAE certificate. And it does take a few weeks to get your certificate, so be patient. It will come. Karen, you wanted to talk about this?
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a note about this. We actually get several emails from many of you who attend our webinars and then you don't hear back from us, you don't get a follow-up email. It's my practice. I always send out a follow-up email after the webinar just to give you some resources and give you all these links. The reason you may not get them is because you may actually be opted out of our system. And due to spam acts, we can't send you, and we're not allowed to send you anything. So it's, just to make sure that you do continue to receive our webinar invitations and newsletters, things like that, if you can just visit cpp.com/emailpress, and you can just go ahead and check off your email prefaces there. I did make a note because some of you also, you may get a little confused. You receive emails from us as far as the invitations go, but when you sign up for a webinar, say through a social media site or somebody sends it to you, when you get confirmations, those are actually not coming from our system. They're coming from the GoToWebinar system, which is what you're using right now to view this webinar. So, their opt-in, opt-out is completely different from us. So I just wanted to make sure, because, we like to send you updates and things like that, and so we just want to make sure that you're actually getting them from us. So just a quick note on that.
Good. That's important. Thank you, Karen. And also just a reminder, if you haven't taken the MBTI and verified your type with a certified practitioner, you can do that at MBTI Complete. The website is mbticomplete.com. There is a charge for that, but it does take you through the MBTI and through the verification process itself. It's an interactive program. And a reminder that Jack and Jim are the representatives from CPP that work with education accounts. Jack is online. Jack, did you want to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar.
Jack, I usually bring you in a little bit more, and I didn't. I apologize, but I'm glad to have you there for any product questions or anything that any of us have.
I was thinking about jumping in when you were talking about extroverts and being able to get their energy through a telephone conversation, for example. And I will say when I first moved to the Bay Area, I came here not knowing probably all of 2 or 3 people in the area. So whenever I would wake up on the weekends in my little white box of an apartment, I would be kind of going out of my mind. I was like, oh, I need something external. So that's when I really started listening to NPR as religiously as I do. Just to have something sort of going on in the background, I feel much more at ease.
That's very common with, I know that you have an extroverted preference, and that's very common with extroverts, that they tend to have activity going on around them. Extroverted students, for instance, tend to study with noise on. Extroverted students can study with other people talking, including the radio talking at them, whereas the introverted preference is much more focusing inwardly, and it's quite different.
Absolutely.
Although we all have a need for people in our lives, I can tell you. living on the top of a mountain without a lot of people around. Sometimes I just go out in the front yard and talk to people that walk by the house, and I'm an introvert. That's where we're going to end today, I think. Karen, are we about at closing time?
Yes, we are very close. And actually, I just want to say thank you. Like you probably know by now, I love the social media stuff. So I love all the tweets that all of you have been sending in. And I started writing down everyone's names, but I'm going to take a long time if I read them all. So I will tweet you back telling you thank you. So, and thank you also, everybody, for all of your really great questions. So I mean, this really makes up a lot of really great content. I mean, Judy, you give us a lot of really great content. All these questions also, you know, they're amazing. So, but, you know, so again, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Judy, because you share all of your knowledge and expertise, and it's wonderful. This is a really great webinar. So I want to make a note. Our last webinar for this 2012-2013 series is scheduled for May 23rd, like Judy mentioned earlier, and is going to cover the topic of finding best fit MBTI type. So to register, you can visit our website, and it is at cbp.com/askanexpert. Now today's webinar, like I mentioned before, is being recorded, and we will be posting it to that same link that I just mentioned. It'll be up in about approximately 2 weeks, so you can check everything out. So I hope you can join us in May, and thank you all for attending, and have a wonderful day.
And thank you, Karen, for all that you do with this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Judy. Thank you, Jack. Bye, everyone.
Bye.